Get that single dad out of first class, Karen demanded. But when the airline CEO stood up and silenced her forever, no one could have guessed the cruel plot waiting at baggage claim. Will a father's love be strong enough to protect his little girl when the world decides he doesn't belong? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. James Holloway's calloused hands trembled as he stared at the crumpled piece of paper on his kitchen table. The yellow construction paper was covered in Lily's distinctive 7-year-old handwriting, complete with backward letters and hearts dotting the I's. His eyes kept returning to 2 lines on her wish list. Ride in an airplane. See the ocean with Daddy. The clock on the wall ticked past 9, and the smell of motor oil still clung to his work uniform. He'd just finished another 12-hour shift at Pete's auto shop, but exhaustion couldn't dim the excitement bubbling in his chest. After months of extra shifts and careful saving, he'd finally done it. From his wallet, he pulled out 2 plane tickets to Miami. The paper was crisp and official-looking, but what made his heart skip was the words "First Class" printed in bold letters. It had cost nearly all his savings, but Sarah, his late wife, had always dreamed of taking Lily on a first-class flight someday. "Lily, Bug?" he called out, his voice soft but carrying through their small apartment. "Can you come here for a minute?" The patter of small feet echoed down the hallway, and Lily appeared in her favorite pajamas, the ones with little dolphins swimming across blue fabric. Her dark hair was still damp from her evening bath, and her eyes were bright with curiosity. "What is it, Daddy?" She climbed onto the chair next to him, her feet swinging above the floor. James took a deep breath, savoring the moment. "Remember this wish list you made last month?" Lily nodded eagerly. "Uh-huh. Miss Thompson had us write down our biggest dreams in class." "Well?" James pulled out the tickets and held them up. "How would you like to make these 2 wishes come true next week?" For a moment, Lily just stared at the tickets, her mouth forming a perfect O. Then her eyes grew wide as understanding dawned. "Are those airplane tickets?" James nodded, feeling his own excitement mirror the growing joy on his daughter's face. "2 tickets to Miami, where there's a great big ocean waiting for us." Lily's squeal of delight could probably be heard 3 apartments over. She launched herself at James, nearly knocking him off his chair as she wrapped her arms around his neck. "Really? Really, really?" "Really, really," he laughed, holding her tight. "And guess what? We're going to fly first class." Lily pulled back, her face scrunched in confusion. "What's first class?" James smiled, remembering how Sarah used to describe it. "It's like riding in a princess carriage in the sky. The seats are extra big and comfy, and they treat you extra special." "Like a real princess?" Lily's eyes sparkled. "Just like a real princess," James confirmed, his heart warming at her joy. "Your mom always wanted to take you on a first-class flight someday. She said her little girl deserved to see what it felt like to sit in the fancy seats, even if just once." Lily's expression softened at the mention of her mother. "Mommy wanted that? She sure did, sweetheart. She used to say that sometimes you need to treat yourself like royalty, just to remember how special you are." They spent the next hour at the kitchen table, Lily pelting him with questions about airplanes and oceans while James heated up their dinner of mac and cheese. She wanted to know everything: how high the plane would fly, if they could see their house from up there, if dolphins would come to say hello when they reached the beach. After dinner, James helped Lily pack her small pink suitcase. She insisted on bringing her favorite stuffed dolphin, Mr. Finns, and carefully selected her prettiest sundresses for the trip. James packed his own bag quickly, just the essentials, and his best casual clothes, freshly washed and pressed. When it was time for bed, Lily clutched Mr. Finns as James tucked her in, smoothing her covers just the way she liked them. "Can you tell me a story about Mommy and airplanes?" she asked sleepily. James settled onto the edge of her bed, his hand gently stroking her hair. "Well, the first time your mom ever flew on a plane, she was so excited she couldn't sleep the night before. She told me she kept imagining she was a bird soaring through the clouds." As he continued the story, Lily's eyes grew heavy, but her smile remained. Just as she was drifting off, she murmured, "Mommy would be proud of you, Daddy." James felt his throat tighten with emotion. He leaned down and kissed her forehead, whispering, "Sweet dreams, Lilybug." He lingered in the doorway, watching his daughter sleep peacefully. Her dreams already filled with oceans and airplanes and the promise of adventure to come. The morning sun hadn't yet peeked over the horizon when James gently shook his daughter's shoulder. "Rise and shine, sweetheart. Today's the big day." Lily's eyes fluttered open, confusion giving way to excitement as she remembered. "We're going on an airplane!" She bounced up from her bed, her purple unicorn pajamas rumpled from sleep. James helped her pack the last few items: her favorite stuffed elephant, a book for the flight, and the bright yellow backpack her mother had bought her 2 birthdays ago. His own stomach was doing nervous flips, but he kept his voice steady. "Ready for some breakfast? I know just the place." The Sweet Stop Diner sat just 3 blocks from the airport, its neon sign casting a warm glow in the pre-dawn darkness. A bell chimed as they pushed through the door, and the smell of fresh coffee and maple syrup wrapped around them like a warm blanket. Well, if it isn't the Holloways. Betty, the elderly waitress who had served them countless Saturday mornings, waved from behind the counter. "What brings you two out so early?" "We're going on an airplane," Lily announced, loud enough for the whole diner to hear. A few early morning truckers smiled into their coffee cups. "Is that right?" Betty winked at James. "Then you'll need a proper breakfast. How about some special pancakes?" They slid into their usual booth, its red vinyl seats squeaking beneath them. Lily pressed her face against the window, watching the planes taking off in the distance, their lights blinking against the dark sky. "Daddy, will our plane have lights like those?" "Sure will. Maybe even brighter ones." James sipped his coffee, trying to calm his nerves. He'd faced worse situations during his military service, but something about this trip, about stepping into a world that felt beyond his reach, made his hands shake slightly as he held his mug. Betty arrived with 2 plates stacked with pancakes, arranged to look like Mickey Mouse faces with whipped cream smiles and strawberry eyes. "On the house," she said, squeezing James's shoulder. "For our favorite travelers." Lily dug in immediately, maple syrup dripping down her chin. James watched her, his heart full. These were the moments that made everything worth it. The long hours at the auto shop, the tight budgets, the lonely nights. His daughter's joy was worth every sacrifice. As they finished their breakfast, the sky outside began to lighten. James checked his watch. They had plenty of time, but his anxiety made him want to arrive early. He left an extra-large tip for Betty, despite her protests about the free meal. The airport terminal loomed before them, its glass walls reflecting the rising Sunday. James gripped their tickets tightly in one hand, Lily's small fingers in his other. The check-in area buzzed with early morning activity, business travelers in suits, families with vacation gear, airline staff in crisp uniforms. They joined the first-class line, and James felt immediately out of place. His worn jeans and simple button-down shirt stood in stark contrast to the designer luggage and expensive watches surrounding them. Lily, however, seemed completely at ease, watching everything with wide-eyed wonder. "Next, please," called the check-in clerk, a young woman with a kind smile. James approached the counter, his heart pounding. He handed over their tickets and ID, half expecting to be told there had been some mistake. The clerk's fingers flew over her keyboard. "Mr. Holloway and Miss Holloway?" Her smile widened as she looked at Lily. "First time flying?" "Yes." Lily bounced on her toes, her excitement infectious. "We're flying in the front seats." "That's right. You sure are." The clerk's warmth seemed genuine as she printed their boarding passes. "You're going to love it. The seats are extra comfy, and they serve the best cookies." James felt some of his tension ease. The clerk's friendly demeanor helped him feel less like an imposter. She tagged their carry-on bags and explained the boarding process clearly, treating them with the same respect she showed to the businessman in the expensive suit behind them. "Your gate is a 7, she said, handing over their boarding passes. "Have a wonderful flight." They made their way through security, where Lily giggled as she went through the metal detector, pretending she was entering a spaceship. James followed, grateful that the TSA agents were patient with her enthusiasm. The terminal stretched before them, a long corridor lined with shops and restaurants just beginning to open. Their shoes squeaked against the polished floor as they walked, Lily's yellow backpack bouncing with each step. She skipped ahead, then back to James, then ahead again, unable to contain her excitement. "Daddy, look, they have little planes in that store." She pressed her nose against a gift shop window, pointing at a display of model aircraft. "Sure do, sweetheart." James checked the time on his phone. They had almost an hour before boarding would begin. His stomach still churned with anxiety, but Lily's joy made it impossible to stay completely nervous. They continued their walk to the gate, passing coffee shops filling with sleepy travelers and newsstands displaying magazines with glossy covers. Lily held tight to James's hand, but her steps were light and bouncing, while his felt heavy with the weight of his concerns. Gate A7 came into view, its large windows offering a perfect view of the planes outside. The morning sun now painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, highlighting the aircraft being prepared for their journeys. James wheeled their carry-on bags toward the seating area, watching Lily skip ahead. She twirled around, her yellow backpack swinging, then ran back to grab his hand again. "Can we sit by the window, Daddy? Please?" "Of course we can, sweetheart." He guided them to a row of seats with a clear view of the tarmac, trying to push away the persistent whisper of doubt in his mind. They belonged here just as much as anyone else, he reminded himself. He'd earned this moment for his daughter, fair and square. James guided Lily down the jet bridge, her small hand warm in his. The familiar scent of aircraft fuel and recycled air filled his nostrils, bringing back memories of military transport flights. But this was different. This was special. "Welcome aboard!" The flight attendant's smile brightened as she noticed Lily bouncing with excitement. "First class is right this way." Lily's eyes grew round as saucers as they entered the cabin. Plush leather seats stretched before them, each one looking more like a comfortable armchair than an airplane seat. "Look, Daddy," she whispered loudly, pointing at the personal TV screens mounted in front of each seat. "Right here, sweetheart." James helped her into seat 3A, next to the window. His hands trembled slightly as he stowed their carry-on bags in the overhead compartment. He'd never been in first class before, and despite having paid for the tickets fair and square, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone would tell him there had been a mistake. A young flight attendant appeared with a tray of drinks. "Would you like some orange juice, young lady?" she asked Lily kindly. "Yes, please." Lily sat up straight, remembering her manners. "Thank you very much." James settled into his seat, watching as Lily carefully sipped her juice, determined not to spill a drop. Her feet didn't quite reach the floor, and she swung them back and forth in contained excitement. "Look at all the buttons, Daddy." She pointed to the seat controls. "Can I try them?" "Sure, honey, just be gentle." James helped her locate the recline button, and she giggled as her seat eased backward. The cabin gradually filled with other passengers. James noticed their crisp business attire and designer luggage, so different from his worn jeans and the old duffel bag he'd packed their clothes in. He pushed away the discomfort, focusing instead on Lily's joy. A commotion near the front of the cabin drew his attention. A woman in an expensive-looking suit was arguing with her husband about overhead bin space. Her voice carried clearly through the cabin, sharp with irritation. "I told you we should have boarded earlier, Richard." She gestured at her designer carry-on. "Now, where am I supposed to put my bag?" James noticed her perfectly coiffed hair, manicured nails, and the diamond rings that sparkled on her fingers. She reminded him of the country club members who sometimes brought their luxury cars to his shop, speaking to him as if he were invisible. The woman, Karen, he would later learn, turned and surveyed the cabin with obvious disdain. Her gaze landed on James and Lily, and her perfectly penciled eyebrows drew together in a frown. "Excuse me," she called out to a passing flight attendant. "There must be some mistake. This isn't the family section of the plane." The flight attendant paused. "I'm sorry, ma'am. All our passengers are correctly seated according to their tickets." Karen's voice rose, sharp enough to cut glass. "Well, there should be some standards. Look at him." She gestured toward James with a manicured hand. "He clearly doesn't belong in first class, and that child will probably be disruptive the entire flight." James felt his face grow hot. Lily stopped swinging her feet, shrinking into her seat as she sensed the tension. He placed a protective hand on her shoulder, his throat tight with humiliation. "Ma'am, I assure you," the flight attendant began, but Karen cut her off. "Get that single dad out of first class," she demanded loudly. "He doesn't belong here. Look at how he's dressed. This isn't a charity flight." The cabin fell silent. Other passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, some staring at their phones, others pretending to be absorbed in magazines. James could feel their eyes on him, judging, wondering. Lily's small hand found his, squeezing tight. "Daddy?" she whispered, her voice trembling. James opened his mouth to speak, though he wasn't sure what he could say to shield his daughter from this woman's cruelty. But before he could utter a word, a deep voice cut through the tension from several rows behind them. "Actually, he's exactly where he belongs." The cabin fell into complete silence as the words hung in the air, commanding attention and respect. James turned, along with everyone else, to see who had spoken. The silence in the first-class cabin felt heavy as a tall, distinguished-looking man in a crisp navy suit rose from his seat. His silver hair and commanding presence drew every eye in the cabin. Robert Caldwell's voice carried both authority and warmth as he addressed Karen directly. "Ma'am, I couldn't help but overhear your comment." He stepped into the aisle, straightening his suit jacket. "As CEO of this airline, I feel compelled to correct your misconception." Karen's face flushed red. She opened her mouth to speak, but Caldwell raised his hand slightly, silencing her with the practiced ease of someone used to controlling boardrooms. "First class isn't about wealth or status," he continued, his tone measured but firm. "It's about the quality of character our passengers bring aboard. Mr. Holloway here," he gestured toward James, "is exactly the kind of customer we're honored to serve." James felt his chest tighten with emotion as Caldwell turned to face him directly. "Sir, I couldn't help but notice your military bearing. Have you served?" "Yes, sir," James managed, his voice slightly rough. "2 tours." Caldwell nodded, a look of respect crossing his features. "Then, you've already proven your worth far beyond the price of any airline ticket." He turned back to Karen, his expression stern. "The real measure of class, ma'am, isn't in someone's wallet. It's in how they treat others." A smattering of applause started from somewhere in the cabin. It quickly spread, growing stronger as other passengers joined in. Several people nodded approvingly at James, while others shot disapproving glances at Karen, who seemed to shrink in her seat. Lily tugged at James's sleeve, her face glowing with pride. "See, Daddy? Everyone knows you're special," her clear voice carried in the cabin, drawing soft chuckles and warm smiles from nearby passengers. "Thank you, sir," James said to Caldwell, fighting to keep his voice steady. "I appreciate you speaking up." "No thanks needed." Caldwell smiled, reaching out to shake James' hand. "Enjoy your flight with your daughter. I hope it's the first of many." As Caldwell returned to his seat, a flight attendant approached with 2 glasses of orange juice. "Complimentary pre-flight beverages for you and your daughter, sir," she said warmly, setting them on their tray tables. Lily carefully picked up her glass, treating it like fine crystal. "Thank you," she chirped, taking a small sip and grinning at the bubbles. James watched as Karen buried herself in a magazine, pointedly avoiding eye contact with anyone. Other passengers were settling in, but the atmosphere had shifted. Instead of feeling like an outsider, James noticed friendly nods and smiles directed his way. The plane began to taxi, and Lily pressed her face against the window, watching with fascination as the ground crews cleared the way. James helped her buckle her seatbelt, making sure it was snug but comfortable. "Daddy," she whispered as the engines began to roar, "you're like a hero in a movie." James squeezed her hand gently as the plane accelerated down the runway. For the first time since losing his wife, he felt truly seen, not as someone who didn't belong, but as someone worthy of respect and dignity. The plane lifted off smoothly, and James leaned back in his seat, savoring this unexpected moment of victory. The soft leather seat cradled him as they climbed through the clouds, and he watched Lily's face light up with wonder at the view outside her window. Her joy, combined with the vindication of Caldwell's intervention, made him feel lighter than he had in years, as if he too were soaring above the clouds that had shadowed his life for so long. The gentle hum of the jet engines filled the cabin as James settled back into his plush leather seat. His hands had finally stopped shaking from the confrontation earlier. Beside him, Lily contentedly colored in her activity book, humming softly to herself. "That was quite something," said an elderly gentleman across the aisle, leaning over with a kind smile. "The way you handled yourself, with such dignity, I would have lost my temper." James felt his cheeks warm. "Thank you, sir. I try to set a good example for my daughter." A businesswoman in front turned around in her seat. "My husband's a single dad, too. It's not easy. You're doing a wonderful job." She gestured toward Lily, who was now carefully drawing what appeared to be an airplane soaring through rainbow clouds. More passengers joined the conversation, their voices warm and encouraging. A young couple shared stories about their own first flight. A retired teacher praised Lily's polite manners. The tension from earlier melted away as genuine friendliness filled their section of the cabin. A flight attendant approached with a gentle smile. "Miss Lily, the captain heard what a brave young lady you are. Would you like to see the cockpit?" Lily's eyes grew wide as saucers. She turned to James, practically vibrating with excitement. "Can I, Daddy? Please." James nodded, his heart swelling at her joy. "Of course, sweetheart." He watched as Lily carefully put away her crayons and followed the flight attendant, her little legs practically skipping down the aisle. Robert Caldwell appeared in the empty seat beside James. "She's a wonderful child," he said, his voice carrying the warmth of a grandfather. "You should be proud." "I am," James replied softly. "Every single day." He paused, gathering his courage. "Mr. Caldwell, I want to thank you for earlier. What you did, it meant more than you know." Caldwell waved off the formality. "Please, call me Robert, and there's no need for thanks." What that woman said was completely unacceptable. He leaned forward, his expression serious but kind. "Listen to me, James. I grew up in a small town in Kansas, son of a mechanic. People tried to tell me where I belonged, too. But success isn't about where you came from, it's about who you are." James felt something tight in his chest begin to loosen. "Sometimes it's hard to remember that." "Never let anyone tell you where you don't belong," Caldwell said firmly. "You earned your place here, same as anyone else. More importantly, you're teaching your daughter an invaluable lesson about dignity and perseverance." Before James could respond, Lily came bouncing back, her face glowing with excitement. "Daddy, the pilot showed me all the buttons and switches, and they gave me these." She proudly displayed a set of plastic pilot wings pinned to her shirt and a signed photo of the cockpit crew. "That's wonderful, sweetheart." James pulled her into a quick hug as she scrambled back into her seat. The flight attendants seemed to appear more frequently at their row, offering extra snacks and drinks. One brought Lily a special kids' meal with a chocolate dessert shaped like an airplane. Another quietly slipped James a voucher for free Wi-Fi access. As the flight progressed, James found himself relaxing truly for the first time in years. The kindness of strangers had created a protective bubble around him and Lily, reminding him that good people still existed in the world. He noticed Karen had remained sullenly quiet in her seat near the front, but her presence no longer held any power over his peace of mind. The captain's voice came over the intercom, announcing their descent into Miami. Lily pressed her face against the window, and James leaned over to join her. The sight below took his breath away. The ocean stretched endlessly toward the horizon, sparkling like scattered diamonds under the afternoon sunday. Miami's coastline curved gracefully below them, a ribbon of white beaches and swaying palms. "Look, Daddy," Lily whispered in awe. "The ocean looks like it's made of glitter." James watched his daughter's face, seeing the pure wonder reflected in her eyes. This was exactly what Sarah would have wanted for their little girl. Moments of pure joy and discovery. The memory of his late wife didn't bring the usual sharp pain, but rather a gentle warmth, as if she were somehow present in this perfect moment. Beside them, the azure waters stretched endlessly beneath the wings, promising adventures ahead. Lily pressed her small hand against the window, tracing the coastline with her finger as they descended through the clouds. Her eyes sparkled with the same brightness as the ocean below, and James felt his heart might burst with love for this precious child who faced the world with such open wonder. The plane banked gently, giving them an even better view of the spectacular coastline. Lily gasped as she spotted cruise ships in the distance, looking like tiny toys from their height. The Miami skyline rose proudly against the horizon, its buildings catching the afternoon light like crystals. James found himself mesmerized by the view as well. After years of working long hours at the auto shop, seeing the world from this perspective felt almost surreal. The vastness of the ocean below reminded him that the world was so much bigger than the small-minded prejudices they'd faced. Up here, watching his daughter's face light up with each new discovery, those worries seemed to shrink away like the buildings below. The baggage claim area buzzed with tired travelers crowding around the curved carousel. James lifted 7-year-old Lily onto his shoulders, her small hands resting on his head for balance. Her pink sneakers dangled against his chest as she giggled, playing their usual game of I Spy with the luggage. "I see it, Daddy! Our blue suitcase is coming!" Lily pointed excitedly at their worn navy bag making its way around the bend. James smiled, remembering how they decorated it together with bright butterfly stickers to make it easier to spot. Just as he was about to set Lily down to grab their bag, 2 uniformed security agents approached with stern expressions. "Sir, please put the child down and step aside with us," the taller agent said, his hand resting on his belt. James's heart skipped a beat, but he kept his voice steady for Lily's sake. "Of course, sweetheart. Let's get down now." He carefully lowered her to the floor, keeping her small hand in his. "Mr. Holloway?" The second agent checked a tablet. "We've received a security flag regarding suspicious behavior during your flight. We need you to come with us." James felt eyes turning toward them. Other passengers slowed their pace, watching the scene unfold. From the corner of his eye, he spotted Karen and a well-dressed man he assumed was her husband, standing off to the side with satisfied smirks. "There must be some mistake," James said quietly, conscious of Lily's grip tightening on his hand. "We just had a peaceful flight in first class. The airline CEO himself—" "Sir, please spread your arms and legs," the taller agent interrupted, moving to pat him down. Lily's lower lip trembled. "Daddy, it's okay, sweetie," James assured her, though his cheeks burned as the agent patted down his legs in front of the growing crowd. "Just a mix-up." The second agent rifled through their carry-on bag, pulling out Lily's stuffed rabbit and setting it carelessly on a nearby bench. Lily's eyes welled up at seeing her beloved toy handled roughly. "That's Mr. Hoppy," she whispered. "He doesn't like being alone." James wanted to reach for her, to shield her from this humiliation, but the agent held him firmly in place. More travelers gathered, some filming with their phones, others whispering behind their hands. Karen's voice carried across the space, deliberately loud. "Well, what did he expect? People like that don't belong in first class." Lily's small face crumpled in confusion as she looked from Karen to her father. Her voice came out tiny and hurt. "Daddy, why do they hate us?" The words hit James like a physical blow. He stood there, arms still spread, searching for an answer that wouldn't break both their hearts. How could he explain prejudice and cruelty to a 7-year-old who still believed in the goodness of everyone she met? "Ma'am," the second agent called to Karen, "could you please verify this is the individual you reported?" Karen stepped forward, her husband's hand on her shoulder. "Yes, that's him. He was behaving very suspiciously on the flight, making everyone uncomfortable." James' jaw tightened. The memory of the CEO's kind words on the plane seemed distant now, washed away by this new wave of humiliation. The agents continued their search, checking James's ID against their tablets multiple times. Lily had retreated to the bench beside Mr. Hoppy, her small shoulders hunched as she watched her father being searched. "Sir, your checked bag?" the taller agent prompted. "The blue one there." James pointed to their suitcase, now making its third loop around the carousel. The agent retrieved it and began a thorough search of its contents on a nearby table. Lily's carefully folded summer dresses, their matching swimsuits, and the special picture frame holding her mother's photo were all pulled out and examined. Each item felt like another small dignity being stripped away. "Daddy worked extra shifts for those clothes," Lily said suddenly, her voice wobbling but clear. "He stayed up late fixing cars so we could have a special trip, like Mommy wanted." Several onlookers shifted uncomfortably. A woman in a business suit shot Karen a disgusted look and walked away. But Karen and her husband remained, watching the scene they'd orchestrated with cold satisfaction. After what felt like hours but was probably only 15 minutes, the taller agent finally stepped back. "Everything appears to be in order, Mr. Holloway. You're free to go." James began carefully repacking their suitcase, trying to refold Lily's dresses the way his wife had taught him. His hands shook slightly, but he forced them steady. He wouldn't give Karen the satisfaction of seeing him completely broken. "I'm very sorry for the inconvenience," the second agent added quietly, having the grace to look somewhat ashamed. "We have to follow up on all reported security concerns." James just nodded, not trusting his voice. He tucked Mr. Hoppy safely back into the carry-on and shouldered both bags. Lily slipped her small hand into his, and together they walked toward the airport exit. The weight of their luggage was nothing compared to the heaviness in his heart. His daughter's question echoed in his mind. Why do they hate us? He still had no answer that made sense. No way to explain why some people's hearts could be so small, why they would go out of their way to hurt others. As they passed through the sliding doors into the humid Miami air, James felt the shame of the incident settle onto his shoulders like an invisible burden. The excitement of their special trip, the pride of flying first class, the warmth of the CEO's defense, all of it felt tainted now by this final humiliation. The Miami sun was setting as James and Lily walked through the gleaming glass doors of the Ocean View Resort. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, and marble floors stretched out before them. James gripped their worn blue suitcase tighter, feeling every scuff mark on its surface. Lily's eyes grew wide as she took in the enormous lobby. "Look, Daddy, there's a fountain with real fish in it." She tugged at his hand, pointing to a koi pond surrounded by tropical plants. "Pretty amazing, isn't it, sweetheart?" James smiled, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. His military training had taught him to stand tall even when uncomfortable, but his worn jeans and faded t-shirt felt glaringly out of place among the well-dressed guests. They approached the front desk, where a receptionist in a crisp black blazer looked up from her computer. Her smile faltered as she took in their appearance, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the keyboard. "Good evening? Checking in?" Her tone was cool, professional, but distant. "Yes. Reservation for Holloway. James Holloway." He pulled out his wallet, hands slightly trembling as he retrieved his credit card and ID. The receptionist's fingers moved across her keyboard. Her perfectly plucked eyebrows drew together in a frown. "I'm not seeing anything under that name. Are you certain you have a reservation at this hotel?" James felt his face grow warm. "Yes, I'm sure. I booked it 3 weeks ago. Confirmation number." He fumbled with his phone, pulling up the email. "Here it is. 780. 9,542. She glanced at his phone screen without really looking. "I'm sorry, sir, but that confirmation number isn't in our system. Perhaps you made the reservation at one of our sister properties?" Her eyes flicked meaningfully toward the door. Lily pressed closer to James' side. "But Daddy showed me pictures of this hotel, with the big pool and the beach right there." She pointed through the windows to where waves crashed against white sand. "I'm very sorry, but we're fully booked tonight." The receptionist's voice carried just enough volume that nearby guests turned to look. "Perhaps I can recommend something more suitable in the downtown area?" James felt the familiar tightness in his chest, the same feeling he'd had at the airport. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. "Excuse me?" A woman's voice came from behind them. "We couldn't help but overhear." James turned to see a couple in their 50s, both tanned and dressed in resort wear. The woman had kind eyes and silver-streaked hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. "We actually have 2 suites," the woman continued, addressing the receptionist. "My husband and I were supposed to travel with our daughter's family, but they couldn't make it at the last minute. We'd be happy to let this gentleman and his little girl take the second suite." Her husband nodded, stepping forward. "Sarah's right. No sense letting it go to waste. We've already paid for it." The receptionist's professional mask slipped for a moment, revealing clear displeasure. "I'm not sure that's allowed under our policies." "Oh, I think it will be fine," Sarah said firmly. "The reservation's under Thompson. David and Sarah Thompson. Suite 1422. They can take 1,424. James shook his head. That's incredibly kind. But I couldn't possibly. Please. Sarah touched his arm gently. We have grandchildren about your daughter's age. I know how precious vacation memories are. Lily looked up at James with hopeful eyes. Can we, Daddy? Please? David Thompson pulled out his ID and credit card, handling the paperwork with the increasingly flustered receptionist. James stood frozen, pride warring with practicality. He'd saved for months for this trip, and now he couldn't even provide a proper place to stay. Really? I can find another hotel, James protested weakly. Sarah's eyes were kind but determined. Consider it a thank you for your service. She nodded at the military insignia pin on James's backpack. My son served too. 10 minutes later, they were in the elevator with 2 keycards to suite 1,424. The Thompsons had refused any payment, asking only that James and Lily join them for breakfast the next morning. When the elevator doors opened on the 14th floor, Lily couldn't contain herself anymore. She skipped down the hallway, counting room numbers out loud. 1,420, 1,422, 1,424. This is us, Daddy. The suite was more luxurious than any place James had ever stayed. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a stunning view of the ocean, now painted in sunset colors. A massive king-sized bed dominated one room, while a separate living area held a pull-out sofa and dining table. Daddy, look, we can see the whole ocean. Lily ran to the windows, pressing her hands against the glass. Then she turned and launched herself onto the huge bed, bouncing with pure joy. It's so soft, like jumping on clouds. James set their suitcase down and sank into a chair by the window. The last rays of sunlight sparkled on the waves below, and palm trees swayed in the evening breeze. It was beautiful. Everything he'd wanted to give Lily on this trip. But as he watched his daughter's delight, shame crept in around the edges of his happiness. He hadn't provided this. Once again, he'd needed someone else's charity, someone else's kindness, to give his daughter what she deserved. First the airline CEO defending them, and now the Thompsons with their spare suite. Lily's voice broke through his thoughts. Daddy, come bounce with me. It's like we're flying again. James turned toward her, forcing a smile onto his face. She looked so happy, her dark hair flying as she jumped, her mother's eyes shining with pure joy. He wouldn't let his own feelings of inadequacy dim that light. Not tonight. Careful, sweetheart, he said softly. Remember what Mom used to say about hotel beds? Lily giggled, flopping down onto her back. They're for sleeping, not gymnastics. She mimicked her mother's playfully stern tone perfectly. James's throat tightened. Even after 3 years, these little moments could still catch him off guard. The way Lily carried pieces of her mother with her, in her expressions, her mannerisms, her heart. The room grew darker as the sun disappeared below the horizon, leaving only the soft glow of city lights reflecting off the water. Lily continued to explore every corner of the suite, examining the fancy soap in the bathroom and the little coffee maker on the counter, while James sat quietly by the window, watching the waves roll endlessly toward the shore. Golden morning light streamed through the hotel suite's floor-to-ceiling windows, casting warm shadows across the plush carpet. James sat with Lily on their private balcony, the ocean breeze ruffling their hair. They shared a simple breakfast of fresh oranges and bananas from the local market he'd found early that morning. Daddy, this orange is so sweet, Lily exclaimed, juice dribbling down her chin. James reached over with a napkin, dabbing her face as she giggled. Better than the ones from the grocery store back home, huh? James peeled another orange, the citrus scent mixing with the salty air. Below their balcony, palm trees swayed gently, their fronds dancing in the morning light. Can we go to the beach now? Lily bounced in her chair, already wearing her favorite purple swimsuit under her sundress. Her excitement was contagious, and James felt his own smile widening. As soon as we finish breakfast, kiddo. He checked their beach bag one more time. Sunscreen, towels, water bottles, and the little plastic bucket and shovel set he'd picked up at the market. The walk to the beach took only 5 minutes. Lily skipped ahead, her flip-flops making happy slapping sounds against the wooden boardwalk. James carried their supplies, watching as his daughter's face lit up at the sight of the endless blue ocean. "It's so big!" Lily spread her arms wide, trying to encompass the vastness before her. Bigger than in the pictures. They found a perfect spot near the water's edge. James set up their borrowed beach umbrella and laid out their towels. He carefully applied sunscreen to Lily's shoulders and face, making sure to cover every inch of her fair skin. "Now you, Daddy," Lily insisted, taking the bottle from him. She stood on her tiptoes to reach his shoulders, her little hands working with determined concentration. James bent down to make it easier for her, touched by her careful attention. As the morning progressed, Lily proved to be a master sandcastle architect. She dug moats and shaped towers, decorating them with shells she collected along the shoreline. James helped her pack wet sand into her bucket, flipping it over to create perfect turrets. "Look, Daddy, this tower is for Mommy," Lily declared, placing a particularly beautiful pink shell at its peak. "She can see the whole ocean from up there." James swallowed the lump in his throat, running his hand over Lily's sandy hair. "That's beautiful, sweetheart. Mom would love it." A group of kids nearby were struggling with their kites, the colorful diamonds refusing to catch the wind. James watched them for a moment before standing up. "Want to help those kids with their kites?" he asked Lily. She nodded enthusiastically, and they made their way over. James introduced himself to the parents, watching from nearby beach chairs. "Mind if we lend a hand? I used to fly kites all the time as a kid." The parents welcomed their help warmly. James showed the children how to hold the string and run with the wind, explaining the basics of kite flying in simple terms. Soon 3 kites soared high above the beach, their tails dancing in the breeze. "You're good with kids," one of the mothers commented, smiling as she watched her son successfully control his kite for the first time. "Just lucky, I guess," James replied modestly, but her genuine warmth made him stand a little straighter. Throughout the day, more families on the beach seemed to gravitate toward them. Kids joined Lily's sandcastle kingdom, adding their own architectural flourishes. Parents shared snacks and stories. An elderly couple walking their dog stopped to admire the growing sand structure, the husband sharing tales of his own beach adventures as a child. As the afternoon sun painted the sky in softer colors, James and Lily took one last swim in the ocean. The water was perfect, cool, and refreshing. After hours in the Sunday, Lily squealed with delight as small waves lifted her up, her father's strong hands keeping her safe. "Can you believe how clear the water is?" James asked, watching fish dart around their feet. "You can see right to the bottom. It's like magic," Lily agreed, her hair slicked back and glistening with salt water. They stayed until the sun began to set, packing up their belongings with sand-covered hands and sun-kissed faces. The walk back to the hotel was slower, both pleasantly tired from their day of adventure. In their suite, James helped Lily shower off the sand and salt, then tucked her into the big hotel bed. She was asleep almost instantly, her face peaceful and still holding traces of her happy smile. James stood by the window, looking out at the now dark ocean. The moon cast a silver path across the water, and the sound of waves drifted up to their room. He closed his eyes, folding his hands together. "Thank you," he whispered quietly, his heart full of gratitude for this perfect day with his daughter. The simple prayer held all the joy and peace he'd found on the beach, where for a few hours they'd belonged exactly where they were. The small Italian restaurant buzzed with warmth and chatter as James and Lily stepped inside, their clothes still carrying traces of beach sand. Red checkered tablecloths and strings of soft lights created a cozy atmosphere that felt worlds away from their earlier troubles. A bell tinkled above the door as they entered. "Welcome to Giuseppe's," called out a cheerful waitress, her gray hair tied back in a neat bun. "Table for 2?" Lily nodded enthusiastically, sand still dusting her sun-kissed cheeks. "Yes, please. We've been at the beach all day." The waitress, whose name tag read Maria, led them to a corner table near a window where potted herbs grew on the sill. James helped Lily into her chair, carefully tucking a napkin across her lap like he always did at home. "What a lovely father you are," came a gentle voice from the next table. An elderly woman with kind eyes and silver hair smiled at them. "I couldn't help but notice how tenderly you care for your daughter." James felt his cheeks warm. "Thank you, ma'am. I'm Margaret," the woman said. I taught elementary school for 40 years before retiring. You can always tell when a child is well loved." Lily beamed at the compliment. "Daddy's the best. He works really hard fixing cars, and he reads to me every night, and he even learned to braid my hair." Margaret's eyes crinkled with warmth. "Those are the things that matter most, dear. Not fancy things, but love and time spent together." Maria returned with menus, but Lily was more interested in chatting with Margaret. "Did you like being a teacher?" "I love school, especially art class." "I did indeed," Margaret replied. "And do you know what I learned in all those years? The bravest students weren't always the loudest or the ones with the most expensive clothes. They were the ones who kept trying, who helped others, who showed kindness even when others didn't." James listened intently, struck by how Margaret's words seemed meant for both of them. She had a way of speaking that made him feel understood without saying it directly. Their food arrived: spaghetti and meatballs for Lily, chicken parmesan for James. The aroma of garlic and herbs filled the air around them. Margaret insisted they try some of her garlic knots, sharing them across the tables. "You know," Margaret said thoughtfully, breaking a piece of bread, "I had a student once who reminded me of you, Lily." Her father was raising her alone too, and some of the other children weren't always kind about her second-hand clothes. But she had such spirit, such joy, just like you. "What happened to her?" Lily asked, twirling pasta on her fork. "She grew up to be a doctor," Margaret smiled. "Because her father, like yours, taught her that what matters isn't what others think of you, but who you choose to be. That girl belonged in medical school just as much as anyone else, and now she saves lives every day." James felt something tight in his chest begin to loosen. He'd been carrying so much worry about whether he was enough for Lily, whether she would be held back by having just him, by their modest means. "The world can be unkind, sometimes," Margaret continued, her voice gentle but firm. "But there are always more good people than bad. We just have to be brave enough to keep our hearts open to find them." Other diners began joining their conversation. The owner, Giuseppe himself, came out to share stories of arriving in America with nothing but hope and his grandmother's recipes. A young couple at another table talked about their own struggles and triumphs. The restaurant had become more than just a place to eat. It felt like a gathering of friends, of people who understood that everyone's story mattered. As they finished their meal, Margaret reached over and patted James's hand. "You're doing a wonderful job with her. I can see it in her eyes, in her confidence, in her kindness. Those are gifts that come from feeling secure in a parent's love." James had to swallow hard before he could speak. "Thank you. Sometimes it's not easy." "The most worthwhile things rarely are," Margaret replied. "But you're exactly the father she needs." When it came time to pay, Giuseppe insisted on giving them dessert on the house, 2 huge slices of tiramisu. "Family tradition," he winked. "We believe in spreading sweetness whenever we can." As they prepared to leave, several people came to say goodbye. Margaret hugged them both, slipping Lily a small shell she'd found on her morning walk. "To remember that beauty can be found in the simplest things," she said. The evening air was soft and warm as they stepped outside. Street lamps cast a gentle glow on the palm trees lining the sidewalk. Lily skipped ahead, still holding Margaret's shell, humming a tune she'd learned from Giuseppe. James followed, carrying her bright blue sand bucket from their day at the beach. It was full of shells and smooth stones they'd collected together, precious treasures to take home. But the real treasures, he realized, were moments like these. Connections with kind strangers, simple meals shared with love, his daughter's joy in small things. For the first time since arriving, James felt truly at peace. His steps were lighter, his shoulders straighter. Sometimes it took seeing yourself through others' eyes to remember your own worth. Lily's happy humming floated back to him on the breeze, and James smiled, holding her sand bucket like the treasure chest it was, full of memories they'd made together, proof that they belonged anywhere their hearts led them. The afternoon sun streamed through the hotel room window as James helped Lily organize her seashell collection on the dresser. Each shell had its own story. The pink one from their morning walk, the spiral one that reminded her of a unicorn horn, the matching pair they'd found while splashing in the waves. His phone buzzed unexpectedly. An unknown number. James almost let it go to voicemail, but something made him answer. Mr. Holloway? This is Robert Caldwell. James straightened up, recognition immediate. Yes, sir, from the flight. The very same. The CEO's warm voice carried through clearly. I hope you and your daughter are enjoying Miami despite yesterday's unfortunate events. We are, thank you. James watched Lily arrange her shells in a heart shape. The beach has been wonderful. Excellent. Listen, the reason I'm calling, our airline is hosting our annual charity gala tonight at the Grand Marina Hotel. Nothing too stuffy, just a celebration of community and giving back. I'd be honored if you and Lily would attend as my personal guests. James felt his throat tighten. The Grand Marina was the fanciest hotel in the city. That's very kind, sir, but Please, Caldwell interrupted gently. No pressure, but I think it would mean a lot to have you there. The gala supports education programs for underprivileged youth. Your presence would remind everyone what real dignity looks like. Lily looked up from her shells, curiosity bright in her eyes. Who's that, Daddy? James covered the phone. Remember the nice man from the airplane, Mr. Caldwell? Her face lit up. The one who stood up for us? That decided it. James uncovered the phone. What time should we arrive? 7 o'clock. Formal attire, but please don't worry about that. Just come as you are. I'll leave your names at the door. After hanging up, James knelt beside Lily. How would you like to go to a fancy party tonight? A real party? Like Cinderella? Lily bounced on her toes. Something like that. There will be music and nice food and... Can I wear my special dress? She was already running to their suitcase. The one Mommy picked out? James smiled, remembering. Before Sarah passed away, she'd insisted on buying Lily a beautiful blue dress, saying their daughter should always have something that made her feel like a princess. It had been too big then, but now. Let's see if it fits, he said. While Lily dug through their luggage, James retrieved his own suit from its garment bag. It wasn't fancy, just a simple navy blue suit he'd worn to weddings and funerals, but it was clean and well cared for. Sarah had always said he looked handsome in it. He laid it out on the bed, noting where it needed pressing. The hotel room had an iron and board, thankfully. As he worked on removing the wrinkles, Lily emerged from the bathroom wearing her dress. Look, Daddy, it's perfect now. She twirled, the blue fabric swishing around her knees. The dress had indeed waited for her to grow into it, as if Sarah had known exactly when her daughter would need it most. You look beautiful, sweetheart. James blinked back sudden tears. Just like a princess. Can you do my hair special? Like Mommy taught you? Of course. He gestured to the desk chair. Sit here while I finish ironing, and we'll make it extra pretty. As James carefully pressed each crease in his suit pants, Lily chatted excitedly about the party. Would there be dancing? Would Mr. Caldwell remember her? Could she bring her favorite shell to show him? One thing at a time, James chuckled, moving on to the jacket. The familiar motions of ironing helped calm his nerves. He could do this. He would show Lily that they deserved to be anywhere they wanted to be, that they didn't need to hide or feel ashamed. When the suit was pressed and hanging properly, James turned his attention to Lily's hair. His fingers had learned this skill through hours of practice after Sarah got sick. French braiding wasn't easy for a mechanic's hands, but love had made him persistent. You're getting better at this, Daddy, Lily said, as he carefully wove her hair into a crown braid. It doesn't pull anymore. Practice makes perfect, he replied, securing the final pin. There, take a look. Lily scrambled to the bathroom mirror. It's just like how Mommy used to do it. She touched the braid gently. Do you think she can see us? Do you think she knows we're going to a fancy party? James knelt beside her, meeting her eyes in the mirror. I think your mom sees everything you do, honey, and I think she's very proud of how brave and kind you've been. Even when those mean people at the airport made you sad, especially then. He squeezed her shoulders gently. Because you showed me what really matters, not what other people think, but how we treat each other. Lily nodded solemnly, then brightened. Can I help you get ready now? I can pick out your tie. James laughed. All right. But remember, we want something that matches, not the bright orange one Uncle Mike gave me for Christmas. They returned to the bedroom where his freshly pressed suit hung waiting. Lily studied his small collection of ties with intense concentration before selecting a dark blue one that complemented her dress. "Perfect choice," James said, laying it beside his suit. There was still time before they needed to get dressed, time enough for a quick dinner and maybe a story to calm their excitement. But as he watched Lily admiring her dress in the mirror, practicing her curtsy and giggling, James felt a surge of gratitude. Whatever happened at the gala tonight, they would face it together, with the same grace and dignity that Sarah had taught them both. James stood at the entrance of the grand ballroom, adjusting his tie for the 10th time. The room sparkled like something from a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow reflections across marble floors, and soft classical music floated through the air. Lily squeezed his hand, her eyes wide with wonder in her blue party dress. "It's like a castle, Daddy," she whispered, bouncing on her toes. James swallowed hard, fighting the familiar feeling that he didn't belong. Men in expensive suits and women in designer dresses mingled effortlessly, their laughter mixing with the tinkling of champagne glasses. His own suit, though freshly pressed, had seen better days. "James, you made it!" Robert Caldwell's warm voice cut through his anxiety. The CEO strode over, looking completely at ease in his tuxedo. He shook James's hand firmly and bent down to Lily's level. "And who is this lovely young lady?" Lily did a small curtsy, just like she'd practiced in their hotel room. "I'm Lily Holloway, sir. Thank you for inviting us to your party." Caldwell's eyes crinkled with genuine warmth. "The pleasure is all mine, Miss Lily. Would you both follow me? There are some people I'd love you to meet." As they walked through the crowd, Caldwell introduced them to various guests: airline executives, charity organizers, and community leaders. To James's surprise, they treated him with genuine interest and respect. A retired Air Force general spent 10 minutes swapping veteran stories with him. The head of a children's charity was charmed by Lily's detailed description of her seashell collection. "You see," Caldwell said quietly to James during a brief moment alone, "you belong here as much as anyone else. Sometimes we just need a reminder of that truth." The evening flowed more smoothly than James could have imagined. Lily charmed everyone she met, and he found himself relaxing, even enjoying some of the conversations. The food was incredible. Tiny appetizers that Lily declared fancy but yummy, and a chocolate fountain that made her eyes go wide. Around 8 o'clock, Caldwell took the stage for a speech about the airline's charitable initiatives. He spoke about their program helping military families travel to visit deployed loved ones, then paused with a warm smile. "Tonight, we have some special guests with us. We've invited several children to share what flying means to them." He gestured to a small group of kids near the stage. "Who would like to go first?" Before James could process what was happening, Lily's hand shot up. His heart jumped. They hadn't prepared for this. But Caldwell was already helping her onto the stage, adjusting the microphone to her height. Lily stood there in her blue dress, looking tiny under the spotlights. But her voice came out clear and strong. "My name is Lily Holloway, and I'm 7 years old." She took a deep breath. "Yesterday was my first time ever flying on an airplane. My daddy saved up for a long time to take me, because it was my mommy's dream." The room grew incredibly quiet. James felt his throat tighten. "Mommy went to heaven when I was little, but she always wanted to fly first class and see the ocean. Daddy worked extra hard at the car shop to make her dream come true for me." Lily's voice wavered slightly, but she kept going. "When we got on the plane, it was like Mommy was with us. The seats were so soft, and I could see all the clouds, and everyone was so nice, well, almost everyone." A few knowing chuckles rippled through the crowd. But the best part wasn't the fancy seats or the juice they gave me. It was seeing my daddy smile like he used to when Mommy was here. Lily looked directly at James, her eyes shining. "Because Daddy works so hard, and sometimes people aren't very nice to him, but he never stops trying to make me happy. He's my hero." James couldn't stop the tears now. They rolled down his cheeks as he watched his daughter, this precious gift his wife had left him, speaking from her heart. "So thank you, Mr. Caldwell, for being nice to us on the plane. And thank you for letting us come to your party. Mommy would have loved it here." Lily gave a final curtsy, just like she'd practiced. The silence held for a moment, then broke into thunderous applause. James saw people wiping their eyes, heard sniffles throughout the ballroom. Caldwell himself looked moved as he helped Lily down from the stage. She ran straight to James, who scooped her up in his arms, holding her close. He breathed in the familiar scent of her hair, mixed now with the coconut shampoo from their hotel. "Was that okay, Daddy?" she whispered against his neck. "That was perfect, sweetheart," he managed to say. "Mommy would have been so proud of you." Standing there, holding his daughter while applause still echoed through the ballroom, James felt something he hadn't experienced in years: real, unbridled hope. Not just the daily hope that got him through hard shifts at work or lonely nights, but deep, soul-filling hope. Hope that maybe the world wasn't as cold as he'd feared. Hope that his daughter would grow up strong and confident, unafraid to speak her truth. Hope that somewhere, somehow, his wife was watching and smiling at the beautiful little girl they'd created together. For the first time since losing his wife, the future didn't look like an endless stretch of just getting by. It looked bright, full of possibilities, like the sparkling chandeliers overhead. He held Lily tighter, letting that hope fill every corner of his heart. The evening had been perfect until then. James watched Lily twirl near the dessert table, her party dress spinning like a miniature carousel. Several guests had come up to compliment him on raising such a delightful daughter. Even the hotel staff treated him with genuine warmth, offering him coffee and asking about his military service. Robert Caldwell had just finished introducing James to a group of airline executives when the mood in the ballroom shifted. Like a dark cloud passing over the sun, Karen Whitmore and her husband Richard swept into the room. They wore matching expressions of disdain, their designer clothes somehow making them look colder rather than elegant. James tried to focus on his conversation, but he couldn't help noticing how Karen worked the room. She moved from group to group, her perfectly manicured hand covering her mouth as she whispered. After each interaction, people would glance his way, their expressions changing from warmth to uncertainty. "Did you hear?" Karen's voice carried just loud enough for nearby guests to hear. He practically begged for attention on the flight. Made such a scene about being in first class. Richard Whitmore nodded along, adding his own poison to the mix. Using his daughter for sympathy, really. These people will do anything for a handout. The words sliced through the elegant atmosphere like razor blades. James felt his chest tighten as he watched the ripple effect of their lies spread through the ballroom. Guests who had been friendly moments ago now avoided his gaze. Lily, who had been sampling chocolate-covered strawberries nearby, stopped mid-bite. Her small shoulders stiffened as Karen's voice grew louder. "I mean, look at him," Karen continued, gesturing with her champagne glass. "He clearly doesn't belong here. Probably borrowed that suit from Goodwill." James started to move toward his daughter, seeing the hurt blooming on her face. But he wasn't fast enough. "And that poor child," Karen's voice dripped with false sympathy, "being used as a prop in her father's attention, seeking games. It's practically child abuse." Lily's strawberry fell to the floor. Her lower lip trembled as tears welled up in her eyes. "Daddy?" she whispered, her voice cracking. James reached for her, but Lily was already running toward him, her party shoes clicking against the marble floor. She crashed into his legs, burying her face in his suit pants. Her small body shook with sobs. "Why are they so mean, Daddy?" she hiccuped against his leg. "We didn't do anything wrong." James knelt down, pulling her close. He could feel dozens of eyes on them, some sympathetic, others judgmental, all uncomfortable. The beautiful evening had shattered like fine crystal dropped on marble. "Let's go, sweetheart," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. He lifted Lily into his arms, her tears dampening his shoulder. As he turned toward the exit, he caught Karen's satisfied smirk. Richard Whitmore stood beside her, his arm around her waist, looking like a king who'd just won a battle. The walk across the ballroom felt endless. Each step echoed with shame, each whisper from the crowd a reminder that no matter how hard he tried, some people would never see him as worthy. His carefully pressed suit, which had made him feel dignified earlier, now felt like a costume, A failed attempt at belonging in a world that didn't want him. Lily's arms tightened around his neck as they reached the grand doors. "I'm sorry, Daddy," she whispered between sniffles. "I ruined your special night." James's heart cracked at her words. Even in her pain, his little girl worried about him. He pushed open the heavy doors, stepping into the quiet hallway where the chandelier light didn't reach quite so far. The doors swung shut behind them, muffling the music and chatter. In the relative darkness of the hallway, James held his daughter closer, feeling the weight of failure pressing down on his shoulders. The night that had started with such promise had ended like so many others, with him retreating, wounded, while the Karen Whitmores of the world claimed another victory. James fumbled with the hotel room keycard, his hands trembling. Inside, Lily kicked off her shiny party shoes and climbed onto the bed, still wearing her blue party dress. Her small shoulders shook with sobs that tore at James's heart. "Daddy, why don't they like us?" Lily's voice cracked. Her face was streaked with tears, and she clutched her favorite stuffed rabbit, the last birthday gift from her mother, close to her chest. James sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress sinking under his weight. The hotel room felt too big now, too empty, despite its luxury. The Miami skyline twinkled beyond their window, but its magic had dimmed. "Sometimes, sweetheart," he started, then stopped. How could he explain cruelty to a 7-year-old when he barely understood it himself? "Sometimes people they just don't know better. But we didn't do anything wrong." Lily's lower lip trembled. "You work so hard, and Mommy always said you were the best daddy in the whole world." James's throat tightened. He reached for his wallet and pulled out the worn photograph he always carried. Sarah's smile beamed back at him, frozen in time at their favorite park. Her dark hair caught the sunlight, and her eyes sparkled with the same joy he saw in Lily every day. "I can't do this without you," he whispered to the photo, his voice barely audible. The weight of single parenthood had never felt heavier. Lily crawled across the bed and nestled against his side. "What did Mommy say in that picture?" James traced the edge of the photograph with his thumb. "This was the day she told me she was going to have you. She said, 'James Holloway, we're going to be the happiest family in the world.' Were we? The happiest? Every single day." James wrapped an arm around Lily. "Your mom knew how to find joy in everything, even when times were tough. She'd say, 'Look for the helpers. There are always helpers.'" Lily wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Like Mr. Caldwell? And the nice couple who gave us their room? Exactly like them." James looked around the room at their open suitcases and the fancy clothes they'd bought specially for the gala. His first instinct was to pack up and run home, back to their small apartment where at least they knew what to expect. "Should we go home, Daddy?" Lily asked, reading his thoughts the way she often did. James closed his eyes. The memory of Sarah's voice echoed in his mind. "Never let fear win, James. That's not what we fought for. No, Princess, we're not going anywhere." He tucked the photo back into his wallet. "Your mom wouldn't want us to give up. Remember what she always said about bullies?" Lily sat up straighter. "That they're just scared people who forgot how to be kind." "That's right." James managed a small smile. "And what else? That we should feel sorry for them because—" Lily scrunched up her face, thinking hard. "Because they must be really sad inside to be so mean outside." James nodded, drawing strength from his daughter's innocent wisdom. He stood up and pulled back the covers. "Time for bed, sweetheart. It's been a long night. Can I sleep in my dress? Just this once?" Lily's eyes were heavy with exhaustion, but she still managed to give him her best pleading look. "Just this once," James agreed, helping her under the covers. He settled into the nearby armchair, not ready to sleep himself, but needing to stay close. "Daddy?" Lily's voice was already drowsy. "I'm glad we came, even if some people are mean." "Me too, Princess." James watched as she curled up, still in her party dress, her stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin. The city lights cast soft shadows across the room as James sat in the chair, his suit jacket draped over the arm. He felt the weight of the day in every bone, in every breath. The triumph of the early gala, Lily's beautiful speech, the warmth of acceptance, All of it, now tainted by Karen's cruel words. His eyelids grew heavy as he watched Lily's peaceful breathing. She looked so much like Sarah when she slept, with that same slight curve to her lips, as if sharing a secret with her dreams. The chair wasn't comfortable, but he couldn't bring himself to move to his own bed. Tonight, he needed to be close enough to reach out and touch her hand if she woke frightened. As sleep began to claim him, James felt Lily stir. She padded across the short distance between them and climbed into his lap, still half asleep. Her party dress rustled as she settled against his chest, finding that perfect spot where she fit just right, just as she had when she was a baby. James wrapped his arms around her, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. His heart was still heavy, but it was also full of love, the kind of love that could weather any storm, face any challenge. As he drifted off to sleep in the chair, his daughter warm and safe against him, he knew that no matter what tomorrow brought, they would face it together. Sunlight crept through the hotel curtains, painting warm stripes across the carpet. James was still slumped in the armchair, his suit wrinkled from sleeping upright. The events of last night weighed on his shoulders like a heavy blanket. Lily stirred first, her small feet padding across the floor. She'd changed into her pajamas sometime during the night, her fancy dress now hanging slightly crooked on a chair. Her eyes were puffy from crying, but there was something different in them now, a quiet determination that reminded James so much of her mother. She went to James's suitcase and carefully pulled out his worn leather wallet. With gentle fingers, she slid out the treasured photograph they always carried. Sarah, her mother, sitting in their backyard garden, her smile radiant even as illness had taken its toll. Lily studied it for a moment, then walked over to where James was beginning to wake. "Here, Daddy," she whispered, placing the photo on his lap. James blinked away sleep, his hand automatically moving to touch the familiar edges of the photograph. Lily climbed onto the arm of his chair, her voice small but steady. "Mommy told me brave people don't run away. Daddy, I need you to be brave." James's breath caught in his throat. He remembered that day clearly. Sarah, sitting in her hospital bed, talking to Lily about courage while he pretended to read a magazine, fighting back tears. She'd known she was leaving them, but she'd spent her energy preparing their daughter for life's hardest moments. "When did you get so wise, sweetheart?" James asked, his voice rough with emotion. "I remember things Mommy said." Lily touched the photograph, tracing her mother's smile. "She said sometimes people are mean because they're scared or sad inside, but we don't have to be scared back." James pulled his daughter into his lap, careful not to crumple the photo. The morning sun warmed them both as he held her close, feeling her small heart beating against his chest. In that quiet moment, something shifted inside him, a realization that he'd been looking at everything backward. "You know what, Lily Bug?" He used his old nickname for her, earning a small smile. "I've been thinking I needed to protect you from all this. But maybe you've been protecting me too." Lily nodded solemnly. "That's what family does. Mommy said so." James looked at Sarah's photograph again, seeing not just the loss that had haunted him, but the strength she'd left behind, in their daughter, in their love, in the lessons that still echoed years later. Karen's cruel words and actions seemed smaller now, less powerful against the force of this simple morning truth. "I've been running," he admitted, more to himself than to Lily, not just from mean people like Karen, but from believing we deserve good things. He straightened in the chair, his spine finding its old military bearing. "Your mother would have wanted us to stand tall." Lily beamed at him, her mother's determination shining through her smile. "Can we stay for the rest of our vacation?" "Yes," James said firmly. "We're not going anywhere. This trip was your mother's dream for you, and no one gets to take that away." He stood up, still holding Lily, and walked to the window. Miami's morning sky stretched endless and blue over the ocean. Somewhere out there, other families were starting their day, carrying their own hopes and hurts. But right here, in this room, James felt his shame and fear beginning to fade. "What do you say we get some breakfast?" he suggested. "Real breakfast in the hotel restaurant. No more hiding in our room." "Can I have pancakes?" Lily's eyes lit up. "With whipped cream?" "Just this once," James smiled. already knowing it wouldn't be just once. Sarah had always said, joy should be served in generous portions. He set Lily down and watched her skip to the bathroom to get ready. Turning to the mirror, he saw his rumpled suit from the night before. The suit he'd worn like armor, hoping to prove he belonged. Now he understood. Belonging wasn't about proving anything to others. It was about standing firm in who you were, about teaching your child to face the world with courage and grace. James carefully smoothed the wrinkles from his jacket, each movement deliberate and purposeful. The despair that had crushed him last night transformed into something stronger, determination, yes, but also a quiet dignity that came from knowing his worth didn't depend on Karen's approval or anyone else's. He hung the suit carefully, mentally preparing to press it for whatever came next. Sarah's photo went back into his wallet, close to his heart where it belonged. But her spirit, he realized, was alive in every brave choice they made. In every moment they chose joy over fear. The sound of Lily humming in the bathroom brought a genuine smile to his face. She was singing that tune from the airplane, the one she'd learned from the flight attendants who'd shown them kindness. Standing straighter now, James began to get ready for the day ahead. The morning sun blazed against the Miami shoreline as James and Lily made their way back to the hotel's grand ballroom. His freshly pressed suit felt like armor now, not a borrowed costume. Lily wore her favorite yellow dress, the one that reminded James of sunshine and better days. "Ready, sweetheart?" James squeezed his daughter's small hand. "Ready, Daddy." Lily's chin lifted with determination that mirrored her mother's. The ballroom doors loomed before them, polished brass handles gleaming. James took a deep breath, remembering his military training, shoulders back, head high, purpose clear. As they entered, the morning light streamed through tall windows, catching the crystal chandeliers and scattering rainbow spots across marble floors. Conversations stuttered and stopped. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through tall grass. James recognized some faces from yesterday, the kind elderly couple who'd smiled at Lily, the businessman who'd complimented his daughter's speech, and of course, Karen Whitmore, who stood near a column with her usual air of superiority. Robert Caldwell spotted them first, striding over with purposeful steps. "James, Lily, I'm glad you came back." His warm handshake carried the weight of genuine respect. "Thank you, sir." James straightened his tie. "If it's all right, I'd like to say a few words to everyone." Caldwell's eyes crinkled with understanding. "Of course. Let me get everyone's attention." The CEO moved to the small stage where a microphone stood. The morning's breakfast meeting hadn't officially started, but the ballroom was nearly full. Caldwell tapped the microphone twice, the sound echoing across marble and crystal. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention. One of our guests would like to share something with us all." James walked toward the stage, each step measured and deliberate. Lily's hand remained firmly in his, their matched footsteps clicking against the floor. The whispers grew louder, then faded to expectant silence. At the microphone, James looked out across the sea of faces. He saw judgment in some, curiosity in others, and something that looked like hope in a few. Karen stood with arms crossed, her husband nowhere in sight. "Good morning," James began, his voice steady despite his pounding heart. "My name is James Holloway. Most of you probably know me as that single dad from yesterday's flight or last night's gala, but there's more to my story than that label." He glanced down at Lily, who beamed up at him with complete trust. 10 years ago, I wore a different uniform, serving our country in the military. I learned about dignity there, about honor and belonging. When I met my wife Sarah, she taught me about love and dreams. She worked as a teacher, saving every extra dollar for what she called our someday fund, meant for special family moments like this trip. James paused, letting the words settle. The room remained perfectly still. "We lost Sarah to cancer 3 years ago, but before she left us, she made me promise something. She said, 'James, show our daughter that dreams don't have price tags. Show her that dignity isn't bought, it's earned through kindness and courage.'" A few sniffs echoed in the quiet room. Even Karen's rigid posture softened slightly. "I work at Joe's auto shop now. Long hours, honest work. When I saved enough for this trip, I chose first class not because I wanted to prove anything to anyone. I did it because my wife believed our daughter deserved to touch the sky, just once, in the way she'd always dreamed about. James knelt down beside Lily, who wrapped her arms around his neck. You see, belonging isn't about the clothes we wear or the seats we sit in. It's about the love we carry and the dreams we chase. My daughter taught me that this morning when she reminded me of her mother's words about being brave. He stood again, looking directly at Karen now, not with anger but with quiet strength. I don't want your pity or your approval. But I do want my daughter to grow up knowing that kindness matters more than status, that courage means facing unkindness with dignity, and that dreams belong to everyone, regardless of their bank account or social standing. The morning sun caught Lily's face as she looked up at her father, pride shining in her eyes. Robert Caldwell stood at the side of the stage, nodding slowly, a smile of approval warming his features. "Thank you for listening," James concluded, his voice clear and strong. "That's all I wanted to say." The silence in the room felt different now, heavy with understanding and, perhaps, a touch of shame. Karen shifted uncomfortably, her perfectly manicured fingers fidgeting with her pearl necklace. The judgment in her eyes had given way to something else, uncertainty, maybe even recognition of a truth she'd tried hard to ignore. All around the ballroom, faces showed the impact of James's words. Some dabbed at their eyes, others nodded in quiet agreement. The whispers that had followed them earlier were gone, replaced by a respectful hush that felt like the first breath after a storm. The ballroom hummed with tense energy as James finished speaking. His words hung in the air, simple but powerful, touching something deep in everyone present. Several people dabbed at their eyes, moved by his quiet dignity. Robert Caldwell rose from his seat at the main table, his presence commanding immediate attention. He adjusted his tie and cleared his throat, his expression grave but determined. The microphone squealed slightly as he took it, causing a few people to wince. "Ladies and gentlemen," Caldwell began, his voice steady and clear, "what you've just heard from Mr. Holloway is a testament to the kind of character we should all aspire to. But there's something else you need to know." Karen shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her perfectly manicured fingers drumming against the tablecloth. Her husband, Thomas, kept his eyes fixed on his water glass, his jaw clenched tight. "Following the incident on our flight and subsequent events, I ordered an internal investigation." Caldwell paused, his gaze sweeping the room. "What we uncovered was deeply troubling." The room grew so quiet you could hear the distant sound of waves through the hotel's open terrace doors. Lily slipped her small hand into James's, and he gave it a gentle squeeze. "Mr. Whitmore," Caldwell continued, looking directly at Karen's husband, "has been using his position and influence to systematically harass and discriminate against passengers he and his wife deemed unworthy." His voice carried a note of controlled anger. "Security flags, lost reservations, mysterious cancellations, all orchestrated through a network of contacts he's cultivated over the years." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Several people turned to stare at the Whitmores. Karen's face had lost all color, her usual smugness replaced by naked fear. "We have documented evidence of dozens of incidents," Caldwell pressed on. "Families separated during holidays, veterans like Mr. Holloway humiliated, single parents targeted, all because they didn't fit the Whitmores' narrow view of who belongs in first class or luxury hotels." James felt a mix of emotions wash over him: vindication, sadness, and something like pity for the couple who had caused so much pain to so many people. Lily leaned against him, her presence a steady reminder of what really mattered. "The airline has already severed all ties with Mr. Whitmore's business interests," Caldwell announced firmly. "And we will be reaching out to every person we can identify who was affected by these actions." Karen finally found her voice, though it came out as a strangled whisper. "You can't, my husband. We have a reputation to—" "A reputation built on cruelty is no reputation at all, Mrs. Whitmore," Caldwell cut in, his tone sharp but controlled. The crowd began to murmur, the sound growing like waves against the shore. Some people were shaking their heads in disgust, while others were already turning their backs on the Whitmores. Thomas Whitmore stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. His face was red with humiliation as he grabbed Karen's arm. She rose unsteadily, her designer dress suddenly seeming more like a costume than haute couture. The room watched in heavy silence as the couple made their way toward the exit. Karen's heels clicked against the marble floor, each step echoing their descent from grace. Just before they reached the doors, she glanced back once, her face a mask of confusion and defeat. For a moment, she looked lost, like someone watching their carefully constructed world crumble to dust. Then they were gone, leaving behind only the whispers and shocked expressions of the gathered crowd. A slow clap started somewhere in the back of the room. It spread quickly, growing into thunderous applause. But it wasn't just for Caldwell's announcement. People were standing, turning toward James and Lily, their faces bright with admiration and respect. James felt overwhelmed by the wave of support washing over him. He looked down at Lily, who was beaming up at him with pure pride. In that moment, he knew that standing tall, despite everything, had been worth it. Not just for himself, but for every person who had ever been made to feel they didn't belong. The applause continued to fill the ballroom, drowning out the sound of the ocean beyond the windows. It was the sound of truth winning over prejudice, of dignity triumphing over cruelty. And in its echoes, James heard the promise of a better tomorrow, one where his daughter would never have to question whether she belonged. The ballroom buzzed with renewed energy as guests gathered around James and Lily. The tension from moments before melted away, replaced by warmth and genuine connection. A distinguished older gentleman in a military uniform approached first, his chest decorated with medals. "Son, I served in the Gulf too," he said, extending his hand to James. "What you showed today, that's the kind of courage we need more of in this world." James gripped his hand firmly, feeling a familiar camaraderie. "Thank you, sir. I'm just trying to do right by my daughter." More people pressed forward, forming a circle of support. A woman in an elegant evening gown touched James's arm gently. "My husband was also a single father," she said, her eyes kind. "Seeing you stand up like that, it brought back memories of how hard he worked to give me everything." Lily stayed close to James's side, but her earlier tears had given way to a bright smile. She watched in wonder as person after person approached them with kind words and encouraging smiles. A young flight attendant who had been on their original flight pushed through the crowd. "Mr. Holloway," she beamed. "I told everyone in our crew about how gracefully you handled that situation on the plane. You've become quite the legend among us." James felt his cheeks warm at the praise. "I'm no legend," he said softly. "Just a dad doing his best. Sometimes that's exactly what makes someone extraordinary," Robert Caldwell's voice carried as he joined the group. "James, you've shown everyone here what true class looks like, and it has nothing to do with airline seats or social status." Lily tugged at James's sleeve, her face glowing with pride. "Daddy, did you hear that? You're extraordinary." The crowd chuckled at her enthusiasm, and James felt something shift inside him. For years after losing his wife, he'd tried to make himself smaller, to avoid attention or conflict. But standing here now, surrounded by genuine admiration and support, he realized that his daughter had been right all along. Being brave wasn't about fighting back, but about standing tall in your truth. A string quartet in the corner began playing a gentle melody, and the atmosphere in the ballroom softened further. Several couples moved to the dance floor, while others continued to share stories and words of encouragement with James. An elderly couple approached, the woman wiping tears from her eyes. "We watched everything that happened," she said. "The way you protected your daughter's dignity while maintaining your own, it reminded us of our own struggles when we were starting out. Nobody believed in us either, but look at us now, married 50 years. Her husband nodded, adding, "Sometimes the world tries to tell you where you belong, but you've shown everyone here that belonging isn't about permission, it's about perseverance." Lily, who had been absorbing everything with wide-eyed wonder, suddenly broke into an impromptu twirl. Her dress fanned out around her as she spun, and her laugh rang clear and pure across the ballroom. "Daddy, we're first class forever!" The simple joy in her declaration brought fresh smiles to everyone's faces. James watched his daughter, remembering how just yesterday she had been in tears, questioning why people didn't like them. Now here she was, radiating happiness and confidence. A woman in a chef's uniform approached with a tray of specially decorated cookies. "For the bravest little lady in the room," she said, offering them to Lily, "and her equally brave father." As Lily carefully selected a cookie, thanking the chef with impeccable manners, James noticed how natural everything felt now. The nervousness that had plagued him earlier about not fitting in had disappeared. He belonged here not because someone said he could, but because he had earned his place through character and dignity. The music shifted to a slower, more emotional piece. James felt a gentle tug at his hand and looked down to see Lily gazing up at him with those eyes so like her mother's. "Can we dance, Daddy?" she asked softly. The circle of admirers parted, creating a small space on the dance floor. James knelt down to meet his daughter at eye level, overcome with love and gratitude for this little girl who had helped him find his courage again. He opened his arms, and Lily rushed into them, wrapping her small arms around his neck as the music swelled around them. In that moment, holding his daughter close, James felt the full weight of their journey, not just the past few days, but the years since losing his wife. Every extra shift at the auto shop, every bedtime story read through exhaustion, every small sacrifice had led to this moment of triumph and belonging. The other guests watched with misty eyes as father and daughter embraced, the music weaving around them like a gentle blessing. Some whispered about how this was what real victory looked like. Not the defeat of others, but the quiet dignity of remaining true to oneself. The familiar creak of their front door welcomed James and Lily back to their modest home. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows, casting warm patches on the worn carpet they knew so well. Their small suitcase, the one they'd carefully packed with such excitement just days ago, now held memories more precious than any souvenir could contain. James watched as Lily carefully arranged their beach treasures on the coffee table. Smooth shells in various shades of pink and white, a jar of sand, and a few perfectly shaped starfish they'd found during their morning walks. His daughter handled each item as if it were made of gold, her face glowing with remembrance. "This one looks just like the one we found when the sun was coming up," Lily said, holding up a delicate spiral shell. "Remember, Daddy, when you said it was still sleeping?" James smiled, running his finger along the shell's smooth surface. "I remember, sweetheart. That was a beautiful morning." They moved through their familiar living room, which somehow felt different, now warmer, more welcoming. The walls that had once seemed to close in on James after long shifts at the auto shop now held the echo of their laughter from Miami. Even the old family photos appeared to shine brighter. Lily pulled out her princess dress from the suitcase, now slightly wrinkled from travel but still magical in her eyes. She hugged it close before carefully hanging it in her closet. "I'm going to save it forever," she declared. "It's my brave dress now." James nodded, understanding completely. That dress had seen both their lowest moment and their greatest triumph. Like them, it had emerged stronger, more beautiful for having weathered the storm. Together, they approached the mantel where Sarah's photo stood, their daily reminder of love that transcended time. James lifted Lily so she could arrange their chosen shells around her mother's picture. The seashells formed a perfect frame, each one catching the light just so. "Do you think Mommy would have liked the ocean?" Lily asked, adjusting a particularly pearly shell. James swallowed past the lump in his throat. "She would have loved it, sweetheart. Almost as much as she loved you." Their living room was transforming as they unpacked, each memento finding its perfect place. The ticket stubs from their first-class flight, which James had carefully preserved, went into Sarah's old memory box. The hotel key card, a symbol of kindness from strangers, found its home there too. Even the program from the charity gala, with its elegant script and golden edges, became a cherished keepsake. "Look what I made for you, Daddy," Lily said, pulling something from her backpack. It was a drawing she'd done on the flight home stick figures of the two of them standing tall, surrounded by hearts and stars. Above them, in her careful second-grade handwriting, she'd written, "My Daddy the Hero." James knelt beside her, taking in every crayon stroke, every loving detail. She'd drawn him wearing his suit, standing straight and proud. "It's beautiful, Lilybug," he managed, his voice thick with emotion. "I drew it because you were so brave," she explained, pointing to the stick figure version of herself holding his hand. "Just like in the stories you read me." They finished unpacking in comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts of the past few days. James found himself touching the spot where his wedding ring used to rest, a habit he'd developed after Sarah's passing. But for the first time in years, the gesture didn't bring pain. Instead, he felt a gentle warmth, as if Sarah had been watching over them throughout their journey. Lily stood back, surveying their handiwork on the mantel. The shells gleamed against the dark wood, each one telling its own story of their adventure. Sarah's smile in the photograph seemed to take on new meaning, as if she too were proud of their courage. Then Lily turned to him, her eyes bright with wisdom beyond her years. She wrapped her arms around his waist in a fierce hug, pressing her face against his chest. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice muffled against his shirt, "you don't just belong in first class, you belong anywhere we dream." James felt tears well up in his eyes as he held his daughter close. In that moment, all the shame and doubt he'd carried for so long began to fade. The weight of others' judgments, the burden of feeling less than, the fear of not being enough, it all lifted like morning mist in the Sunday. Through Lily's eyes he saw himself anew, not as the struggling single dad, not as the target of cruel prejudice, but as someone worthy of respect and dignity. Someone who had stood tall when it mattered most. Someone who had shown his daughter that kindness and courage could overcome any obstacle. They stepped outside together, hand in hand, into the warm afternoon light. Their small front yard, with its patchy grass and modest flower bed that Sarah had once tended, had never looked more beautiful. The sunlight caught the tears on James's face, transforming them into something bright and hopeful. A gentle breeze carried the scent of their neighbor's jasmine, and somewhere nearby, a wind chime played its gentle song. The same world that had seemed so harsh just days ago now felt full of possibility. James squeezed Lily's hand, feeling the strength of her small fingers wrapped trustingly in his. The future stretched before them, not as a path of struggle and doubt, but as an open road of dreams and potential. They had learned that dignity wasn't found in first-class seats or fancy galas it lived. In the quiet courage of standing up for what was right, in the compassion of strangers who became friends, and in the unshakable bond between a father and daughter who believed in each other. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of James Holloway, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.